So I played Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail since their launch, and I've been farming relics or artifacts in this game for an extremely long period of time. I've built up a bunch of different characters. I pulled for a lot of them. Some of them I use, some of them I don't. And especially in Genshin, I've done a lot of exploration. And so I think, given my experience with both of these games for long periods of time, I can give my opinion as to why so many individuals have a bad time with Genshin, how this inherently affects Honkai Star Rail, and how you can inadvertently ruin your entire experience with the game based around your expectations for it. Now, I won't say that, you don't have to have any expectations going into the game. It's going to be a bad game or a good experience or whatever the case may be. Because I think setting your expectations for a game's performance or a game's quality level is perfectly fine. I think where individuals mess up at is when they get into the game and they start specifically farming stuff like relics or artifacts. If you're a Genshin player transferring over to Star Rail, you may have higher expectations. And if you're an individual who's just getting into either game for the first time and you look at a lot of content creators and what artifacts they have or what relics they have, your expectations and standards will be set too high for you to reasonably build or get any character to a good point. If you continuously farm artifacts or continuously farm relics and you're expecting to get 50 CV or 40 CV artifacts with like 20 to 30 crit damage on them, then you will repeatedly be disappointed because there is a variety of things you can do. Don't get me wrong, if you hop into Genshin or you hop into HSR and you really want to build up a character, yes, relics can help out. But so can traces, so can their light cones, so can their levels, so can the rest of their team with the ascensions too. And so a lot of individuals focus heavily on artifacts and relics as though it makes the entirety of a character, and it makes a good portion of their build and a good portion of their damage, but it doesn't necessarily determine their strength overall. You multiply this with the fact that in a lot of scenarios, especially with Genshin Impact, people pick one character they like and they play them constantly and only them. Now you need two teams for this, but individuals may play, for instance, Yoimiya on one half forever and the other half may be Ganyu. And these are two separate characters. Even though they both use bows, they're two separate characters who have relatively similar playstyles. And so what this means is over the course of 1 year, you may be, relatively happy with their performance. You may be relatively satisfied with what their gameplay is. The second year, you start to feel a little bit tired. And by the third year, you quit. Because despite having both of these characters and despite liking them so much, they're all you play. So the game feels tired and boring because once you reach a certain point, your build is pretty much done. You don't get any improvements and you're not changing out their teams because their teams work so well. And you only play them, so the gameplay is so consistent that if you're not pulling for other characters, if you're not building out and trying other units or different archetypes, you're really going to not necessarily enjoy your time at all. Because being split between farming for artifacts and hunting for the best gear possible, which is fun to a degree, but that's only when you have the ability to do so. If half of your roster is unbuilt, no artifacts, no levels, no talents, then you are in a position to look for the best artifacts for one specific character because you may like that character, but if your other character, if the rest of the team is not built up properly, then regardless of how much you enjoy that unit and how much you like them, they're the lowest priority at that moment. For Genshin, it's a team building game, and for HSR, the same applies, although you don't have reactions. It may be fun to build out the best Silverwolf or the best Zeely, but realistically speaking, if the rest of the team is bad and doesn't have any investment whatsoever, you're going to have a bad time. And then you have newer players who focus so much on relics and artifacts, they ignore everything else. And I'm not going to pretend like I didn't do this. When I hit Trailblaze level 45 or 50, I was all in on relics. I farmed relics pretty much all the time. But it got to the point where I was low on XP, I was low on credits, I was low on everything else. Because there is a desire to build out a good character with a good crit ratio, but there also needs to be that desire to build out the rest of your team and to get them to a satisfactory level to a point to where relics matter. And so I think you have individuals who inherently mess up their progress, and not only that, but also mess up their experience because you may reach a point where your account looks or is at a higher Trailblaze or Adventure rank level, so that enemies are harder, especially Memory of Chaos, and you are incapable of doing it because your characters aren't built. They could have amazing artifacts, but they are underleveled, not invested in terms of talents and traces, and their teammates are barely invested in at all. Which leads to you maybe taking in a really strong main damage dealer onto a Memory of Chaos or Bristle Floor and not completing it because the rest of your team died. And this is only further compounded, I think, by a lot of creators and a lot of individuals saying look for this sort of crit value or get this relic or search for this set. And this doesn't come from a malicious place for a lot of individuals. I understand it's meant to help out. But the problem is when you're guiding a new player and you're telling them what to look for and they don't know what anything else does or what anything else means, it puts them in a situation to where they don't understand why they're looking for it and only that they should have it. And so they're farming constantly for crit rate and crit damage on a single piece. Then they also want something like speed in Honkai Star Rail or Elemental Mastery in Genshin. And then they want to attack as the final piece. And yes, this differs between units, but for the most part, you lead to individuals searching so heavily for this double crit piece that doesn't exist that they won't find for a long time, so that every time they hop onto the game, they're feeling unmotivated because they don't expect to get this piece because it's a very rare piece to begin with, and then they stop building characters as a result because they feel like it's impossible to do so, and then they quit. You also have the alternative effect where your character is so good that you only use them and don't experiment with anybody else. For me, in my Genshin Impact account, my strongest character is going to be miHoYo. She's C6, and I don't use her that often. I may use her once every now and again, but alternatively, I'll go to my C0 Ride. I'll go to my C0 Ganyu. Because yes, having a strong character that can clear content is always valuable, but having a character whose playstyle you enjoy more may be more important to you. Having variety may be more important to you. The same rules apply in Honkai Star Rail. Yes, there is a turn-based mechanic that doesn't necessarily allow you the same flexibility as you would in Genshin Impact. And yes, the class-based system does inherently mess things up. But outside of that, there is still ways to experiment with different characters. You can build a 4-star up. Nobody likes Arlen, but if you do, you can build him up to be good enough. Characters obviously have their inherent strengths and weaknesses, but if you legitimately find one you enjoy, build them up. Because you're going to get a lot more enjoyment finding a character you like the playstyle of and design of than you would from a character who's just strong. And so I think we have a lot of individuals who will solely focus on who is the most meta character right now, who's the strongest, who has the highest DPS ranking. And that leads to individuals being disappointed with their earlier units pulls. If you pulled a Jingyuan and you're finding out Blade does almost as much damage as him or more in certain scenarios, you're disappointed. But if you liked Jingyuan as a character and you got him for that reason, then you're perfectly fine. And that's subsequently how meta can mess up somebody's perception of a game and their enjoyment of it, because they may continuously pull for the strongest unit at that time. And if that unit gets power crept, well, suddenly the unit that you got before isn't one you're using now, and now you feel like you have to pull again. This happens in a lot of games, don't get me wrong. But I think a lot of individuals discount just how much relics have to do with it and just how much investment has to do with it. If you've built up your favorite character, maxed out their traces, gotten them the best relics possible, they may do better than another character of equal value. A new character may have higher potential damage, but if you've invested enough into a character you legitimately like to an extent to where they're strong, they may outdamage that new character if you were to get them now and build them. If you got Zelia on release and you built her up, if you got Yangqing, if you got any character on release and you've invested into them heavily, they may do more damage than a new character like Blade or Kafka would right now, simply because of the investment you put into them and how unlikely it is that you would get equal or extremely powerful relics in the future for that character in such a short amount of time. It takes time to build up every character, especially with the resource drought this game has. And so as a result, if you like someone, just build them. Don't feel like you have to hunt and chase down the strongest character in the game right now. Instead, focus on the characters you enjoy first, and then maybe build out your roster for clearing out Memory of Chaos. The same thing applies in Genshin Impact. Play who you want, get who you want. Don't focus on who's the strongest at that moment, because that can always change each month, each banner, each year. For me, my favorite character in the game right now is Yanqing. I like him a lot. Even though Silverwolf is E6, I did not pull an E6 Yanqing because I'm not about to try a standard banner like that. I'm not that guy. But I want to hear your thoughts. Who's the character you enjoy? Who do you legitimately like? Why do you think people dislike or have a bad time with Genshin, with HSR, with Honkai Impact? I haven't played Honkai Impact, but still. And I hope to see you next time. Sorry for the lack of videos.